All right, welcome to tonight's edition of Post-Gazette Live. I'm Paul Zeise. We are here, obviously, to talk about your Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll talk a little bit about the college football playoff, maybe even talk a little bit about pit hoops at the end. But for the most part, we're going to talk about the Steelers. Obviously, yesterday, 27-14 winners over the Browns. The Steelers are now in position where, they're in a very commanding position in the AFC North. I think that if you look at where they're at, and what they've got to do, they basically have a 2-game lead over the Ravens, and of course they play the Ravens. So even if they lost, a game against the Eagles, for instance, if they beat the Ravens, they're still going to be in pretty good shape when it comes to the AFC North. In fact, I think if they beat even if they lose to the Eagles, if they beat the Ravens, it'll put them pretty much where they need to be in terms of winning the division. And now you start to look at maybe where they're at in the hierarchy of the AFC playoffs. And quite frankly, right now they're in the second position. The third position, which would mean they are the second team in terms of without the teams that don't get a bye. The Chiefs, and we'll talk about them for a few minutes in a few minutes, but the Chiefs are still the team that control the bye. And quite frankly, they have a 2-game lead over the Bills, but it's really a 1-game lead because if they tie the Bills obviously have the tiebreaker. But if the Bills were to lose a game and the Chiefs were to win a couple more games, they could come to Acrisure Staidum with nothing to play for. That would be kind of interesting for the Steelers. But right now, the Steelers are in the third spot, the second spot that doesn't have a bye, the third spot overall. And if the playoffs were to end or to start today, they would get a game against the Chargers, who, by the way, was the latest to fall victim to the quote-unquote Patrick Mahomes magic or whatever you want to call it last night. Chargers are 8-5. It seems to me like the teams are starting to distance themselves a little bit from the rest of the pack. The Colts and the Dolphins both have 7 losses. Which means the best they can do is get to 10-7, which means the Chargers and the Broncos, both of them obviously with 3 wins, can legitimately clinch a playoff spot. But, with 2 wins and maybe a loss by the Colts or the Dolphins, they can get there. If you look at where the Colts are right now, let's take a look. The Colts have, the Broncos actually could take a huge step forward this week because they actually play the Colts. And so if they win that game, that pretty much puts the Colts out of their misery. And then if you look at the Dolphins, where they're at, they still have to play at the Texans. They play the 49ers. They play at the Browns and at the Jets. I have a hard time believing they've got 3 out of 4 road games. They're playing at least 2 playoff teams or teams that are playoff caliber. I have a hard time believing that they're going to go 4-0. They could, but I doubt it. I think they're going to be a team that probably at the best is going to be 9-8, and I just don't know that 9-8 is going to be good enough. Given if you look at, for instance, what the Chargers have left, okay, they've got 8 wins, so basically they got to get to 10 wins. They got the Bucs this week, which isn't easy. Then they got the Broncos, but after that they have the Patriots and the Raiders. So it seems like they're probably going to get to 10 wins. And, like I said before, the Broncos play at home against the Colts. And, of course, it's a hard transition for a team like the Colts to go from playing at home in the Dome to going to have to play in Denver in Mile High. It's probably freezing. It'll be snowing. It'll be a tough environment. And then the Broncos also get the Bengals, and then probably the last week of the season, a Chiefs team that has nothing to play for. So when you look at it all and you add it all up, I think that really the realistic thing is that the Steelers are going to be in really good position, and I would say almost assuredly are going to play against the Chargers. And that, to me, is what you're looking at in the first round. I think the Steelers are going to win the AFC North. I think the Steelers are going to win against the Ravens again when they play in 2 weeks. And I think that basically what they have shown this year is that they're a really good football team. And they have a chance probably to be even better than you think. I think they are a team that has proven they can win in a number of different ways. They've proven they can win with their offense. They've proven they can win with their defense. They've proven that they can be really good in special teams. And so I think that's what you focus on. And coming out of yesterday's game, I said this yesterday after the game of the video with Adam, I don't think you take anything at all from yesterday's game other than they won. I think that when you play a game like that, you're missing an important player. You're missing a big piece of your offense. You're playing a divisional rival. All of those things, the game's going to be a little bit ugly. I think sometimes we go way overboard trying to, break. And I know we've got 7 days or 6 days every week, basically, to break down games and talk about the Steelers and all that stuff. But I'll be honest with you. It can become analysis or paralysis by analysis or whatever the hell that saying is. It can become analysis by paralysis or paralysis by analysis or whatever it is. But, reality is if you look at the big picture, the Steelers played a game yesterday against a team that's in their division that, quite often they play ugly games against, that is very familiar with them and they're very familiar with. They didn't have one of their most important players. And it just kind of was a grind it out, find a way to win game. I don't know that there has to be that much more of an analysis of it, to be honest. I know that again, people will pick it apart for, as long as they can pick it apart, they will talk about, well, this should have happened or that should have happened or Russell Wilson wasn't that good or this. You know what? There are far too many games in a season to get into the minutia of every single one. I mean, that's one of the things that, with 24-hour talk radio, and now we've got 24-hour podcasts, now we've got, 24-hour TV shows and Around the Horn and all this other stuff. I mean, you got to find time to fill content, and you got to find ways to create controversies every week. But to me, sometimes the analysis that is needed for a game like that is the Steelers won. And they won, and that was the only thing that mattered, was getting out of that game relatively healthy and finding a way to score one more point than the Browns. You worry about what the big picture is when you get closer to the playoffs. But right now, they're just trying to find a way to win week after week after week because it's a grind. And so, the larger issue to me now is that they don't have George Pickens probably for the Eagles game coming up. Now we're going to get a chance to see if they can win a game like that without somebody like George Pickens. I mean, because I thought, honestly, when you looked at yesterday's game, I had no doubt they were going to win because they were playing the Browns, and I didn't think the Browns are very good. I thought the Browns were lucky the first time they beat them. I just don't think they're that good. And I think that's the key here, that, let's see what happens without George Pickens. I find it hilarious that Mike Tomlin was, trying to boast about, the other guys and saying, oh, you guys in the media, you've been questioning. Again, it's amazing to me. Then if that's the case, then why did you try and trade for like 16 different receivers if we were all crazy, But to me, go beat the Eagles without George Pickens. That'll be a very, very difficult task. I think what we saw yesterday is that he's an important part of the offense. Not the whole offense, but a very important part of the offense. And, they played against playing against the Browns is probably a different animal than playing against the Eagles. And so, if you don't have George Pickens in next week, which it sounds like he's already been rolled out, or, he's basically rolled. I mean, he's been downgraded to like doubtful already, which tells me he's probably not going to play. You know what? If you don't have him next week, then we'll get a really good chance to see, can this team go and beat a good team, especially on the road? Can they beat a good team on the road without George Pickens? Is there enough other pieces to their offense for them to do that? And that's what we're going to find out, right? As I said yesterday, I think Pat Freiermuth, to me, is a guy they have not used enough. I think that basically they can probably get more even out of their running backs, probably out of the backfield a little bit more than they get even now. I think that basically when you've got Russell Wilson, he's made their receivers look better and play better than maybe any of us thought they could. So I don't think it's a thing where you say, no, they can't go there and win without George Pickens. But I do think they've got to have to expand their offense a little bit to make sure that they get everything they can possibly get out of all the other guys, because they are missing their number one guy. And even Mike Williams, is a guy that I think if you look at Mike Williams, they brought him here for depth. Well, now, you know what? They need him. And his skill set is he's a guy who's going to stretch the field for you. So that's why you brought him. In case you don't have George Pickens for a game or two, you can still stretch the field a little bit. So I think that really when you go all out here and do the analysis that needs to be done, the Steelers have enough weapons that they have an opportunity still to move the ball and do some good things. The question is, do they have a home run hitter without George Pickens? And I don't know. I just don't know that they do. If you take George Pickens out of the equation, who's their second best playmaker? Difference maker, playmaker. I'm at a loss, really. Najee? He's a good player. Good, grinded out, workhorse type of back, but difference maker? Playmaker? No. Guy that changes the game with one play? No. Maybe Mike Williams, although, outside of his first catch of the year, I don't know that we've seen a lot of that. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe Pat Freiermuth. I thought this week they used him better and they used him more. I think they can still get more out of him. I don't know that they use him. I remember we heard all about the tight end situation. The tight end situation, which was, the Arthur Smith was going to utilize the tight ends, and it was going to be amazing what he does. I don't know, man. I have a hard time even believing that one, because I haven't seen it the way I thought it was going to be with Pat Freiermuth, because I think he's the ultimate pass-catching kind of tight end for you. He's not a great blocker. I get it. It's not his forte. I get it. Not what he's really good at. I get it. But he's a really good pass catcher, and I think that he can become a playmaker even more than he has been. So there's pieces here I like. I think there are some things that can go right for the Steelers. And quite frankly, you survived the Browns game without George Pickens. Now, you're almost playing with house money. You're playing an NFC team on the road that you're not supposed to beat anyway. So go see what happens. And if you win, I think that is going to be a situation where you get a lot of confidence that, hey, if George Pickens were to go down in the playoffs, we can still win games. We can still beat good teams. I've said it before. I think that the Steelers are the best team. I'm sorry. I think that, when you look at who are the best teams, I think the Eagles and the Lions, and I know they lost last night, but the Bills to me are probably the three best teams. The Chiefs and the Steelers are probably next to. And when I say that, I know the Chiefs are 11-1. They just know how to win games. Me saying who do I think is the best team versus who do I think is going to win in the playoffs is different. Who do I think are the best teams? Again, Lions, Eagles, and Bills look to me like probably they might be the three most talented teams, or the three best teams. If they play their best, they're going to be really hard to beat. Who do I think is going to win in the playoffs? Well, until you beat Patrick Mahomes, I'm sorry. Someone's got to beat him. Someone's got to beat him before I believe he's going to lose. Just like, last night's game, watching him play, even when the Chargers took a lead, I was like, they're not going to win this game. The Chiefs are going to find a way to get down the field, score, and they're going to score at the end or whatever. And, of course, this time they got a bounce off of the upright. Right? And it went in, and the next thing you know, it's like, well, wait a minute. Do they get every single lucky bounce? Well, at some point, it's not luck. My point is, I don't think they're the best. They're one of the two or three best teams. But when it comes to winning games, nobody wins better than them. They're the best winners. They're the most winning, team right now. They've got the quarterback who knows how to win, who knows how to pull games out for them. So it's one of those things where, it's kind of like, well, we just got to keep it kind of close because we know in the fourth quarter we've got Patrick Mahomes and you don't. But honestly, I don't know that they're better than the Steelers, to be honest. And I know that there's going to be some people who are going to blow me up saying, I can't believe you just said the Steelers might be just as good, if not better than the Chiefs, but it's true. It's absolutely true. I think the Steelers match up well with the Chiefs. Clearly, going to Kansas City to win a playoff game is not going to be easy. It's just that's not an easy place to play. They're obviously very good. And again, you got Patrick Mahomes you got to beat. But what I'm saying is, I like their chances there better than I do in Philadelphia. And I would even say the one team I think the Steelers might want to avoid in the playoffs is the Bills. I mean, I think they beat the Ravens. They can beat the Texans. The Chargers and the Broncos are probably a year away. The Chiefs are a team that they probably are not going to beat in Kansas City, but they could beat them. Like if I had to rank the Steelers' opponents in terms of who do they least want to see in the playoffs, right? When it comes to, the playoff run that they're going to make, I would say number one is the Chiefs in Kansas City because that's where they're going to be, in Kansas City. That's a really difficult assignment. Followed very closely by the Bills in Buffalo. Those are probably the two teams that I say you want to avoid. And obviously, you're probably going to have to play one of them if you want to get to the Super Bowl. But the Ravens, the Texans, all these other teams, I think the Steelers would beat them. I do. Even on the road. And the thing about it is the Steelers probably wouldn't be on the road against any of them, except for the Chiefs and the Bills. So to me, I think this is a good week for them to kind of figure out really just how good they are without George Pickens because it looks like he's not going to be able to play against the Eagles. And the Eagles are as good as any of them. And I think that the Steelers have a number of different ways that they can attack this and approach this. But the biggest thing to me is they now have the opportunity, I think, to close out the AFC North over the next 2 weeks, which would really give them a good opportunity to get rested, healthy, to work on some things going into those last couple of weeks in the playoffs. I mean, it'd be nice for the Steelers if that Chiefs game wasn't relevant to them. That would be really nice for the Steelers. If they could play, these next 2 weeks and they win these two games, it puts them in a really good spot down the stretch. So I think that's where we're at with that stuff. I do think that what we saw yesterday from Mike Williams might be something that we will see a little bit more of now that Pickens is banged up because the Steelers have the luxury of using him a little bit more and, putting him out there to run the kind of routes that you need him to run to sort of stretch the field for you, and I think that's where we're at when it comes to Mike Williams. It's a situation of where now you might have an opportunity to get him get him into the offense a little bit and get him to a point where now you can use his talents and his skill set because, again, there's a lot of duplication when George Pickens is out there. There's a lot of routes that you might ask Mike Williams to run, but why would you do that when you want that to be George Pickens' route? But I'm looking at it here. Mike Williams had 3 catches, 36 yards. He averaged, 12 yards a catch. It's kind of what you're looking for from him. So I just feel like, all of that above is just kind of the Steelers getting ready for the playoffs. And so it's going to be important now for them to refine some of these things. And I think if you look at it from that standpoint, it's going to be a bright couple of weeks because they are in a great position. By the way, the game's always on at Archie's. Get down to Archie's on Carson Street. Archie's, home of 50-cent wings Monday through Thursday, home of the Paul Zeise grilled cheese sandwich. So get down to Archie's. And when you get there, tell them Paul Zeise sent you. If you want to watch a little Monday Night Football, I will be there tonight to watch the Bengals. I think it's the Bengals tonight, isn't it? I'll be there tonight if you want to come down and have a few wings. We always have a good time at Archie's on Carson Street. Interestingly enough, I'm looking at how the playoff race is shaping up. And the one team that I can't get a read on really is the Houston Texans. I just don't know how good they are, number one, and whether or not they're actually dangerous. I mean, look at what they've done over the last 6 weeks. They're 500. One of their losses was to the Lions, but two of their losses were to the Titans and the Jets. I mean, they lost to the Lions, and then they lost, at the Packers. And okay, I understand that because they're, in their last 8, they're 4-4. But the two that make me scratch my head are the Titans and the Jets. Those are 2 games you got to win. And if they won those 2 games, they'd be right with the Steelers, and that's where they were supposed to be. But I know they have some injuries, but at the end of the day, that's a team I don't really worry about when it comes to the Steelers. I just think that is one of those things where I look at matchups in football, and I look at the matchups for the playoffs, and I would tell you, I think the Steelers probably match up really well with just about every team out there. The Bills, I think, are a tough matchup for the Steelers. I think they would probably give the Steelers fits. I don't know what you say about the Chiefs. You know what I mean? I'm not saying they're a bad matchup, but when you got Patrick Mahomes and nobody else does, you're a bad matchup for everybody. One of the things, too, about yesterday's game that I really think jumped off the page with the Steelers and the Browns yesterday is that Alex Highsmith coming back, I think, really adds a piece to the defense. There's a lot of people that really, I would say, underrate him, so to speak. But there aren't that many people that really understand how good he is and that he's better than Nick Herbig. Nick Herbig is a guy who I call him a one-trick pony. And there are some people that say, oh, well, you're disrespecting him or, you're not, whatever, you're a hater and all that stuff. No. I think he's really good at that one trick. He's a great pass rusher. He's great at getting downhill to the quarterback. He's great at, creating high-impact plays. I mean, he made one big play against the Bengals, and it turned out to be the biggest play of the game. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is in terms of an all-around player, Alex Highsmith is better. And there's a lot of people that think, well, the Steelers can just trade him. They'll be okay with Herbig. No, I think Herbig is going to be always a much better player when he's a situational player. When you can put him in there and at times when you're looking at it and saying, well, we can possibly rush the passer here. It could be a passing down. That's when you look at it, and he's the kind of guy that really, in those situations, is a high-impact player. Alex Highsmith is somebody you can have out there for every play, every down, every situation he can handle. So, my thing is don't underestimate how important he is to the defense. Don't underrate him as a player. Don't underestimate how good he actually is, because I think Alex Highsmith is a really, really good player. And I just think that it's important that you note that from yesterday's game, that was one of the things. And the other thing I'm going to tell you, I think one of the best acquisitions they made this offseason that we really didn't talk a whole lot when it happened is Deshaun Elliott. I really do. I mean, he's much better than I thought he would be. And I think he's helped the defense. He's one of those guys they signed, and I don't know there was a whole lot of fanfare for when they signed him. It was sort of like, well, they brought in a guy who's kind of a journeyman almost, or whatever you want to say, right? And then every week the guy just seems to make plays, period. And I think that is what you ask for, when you want to go out and sign somebody and bring them in. You're not always going to bring in superstars, but if you can bring in somebody who makes plays like this guy, boy, does that change your defense or your offense or your team in general. I think that's the key. So I really like him. And yesterday he had 13, 14 tackles, something like that. He's really difficult. I think he's playing really well for them. Like I said, Alex Highsmith coming back, I thought he really showed how important he is. I think that The other part of it is Cam Hayward is having a really, really good season as well. So I look at their defense, and man, Cam Hayward is just basically a guy who is making plays, who is dominating like, he's 10 years younger or 7 or 8 years younger, that he is really starting to prove to people that, hey, the contract extension he got, he's worthy of. He's another guy that I would tell you is probably a little bit of a wild card, a little bit of a guy that maybe we didn't know quite exactly what they were going to get from him, but he's been really, really, really good for them. So the Steelers are in good position. I think they're in a good spot. And I think that when you look at the Steelers going forward here, they're as good as anybody in the AFC. And there's no question about that. Switching gears real fast, the college football playoff was announced, and people are losing their minds because Alabama didn't get in or whatever it is. Listen, if you're arguing about a 3-loss team that lost to 2 6-6 teams, you need to get a life. Okay? I'm sorry. I don't want to hear about, well, they would beat the so-and-so on a neutral field and this and that and everything. If you want to be in the playoffs, don't lose. Don't lose to 2 6-6 teams, period. But the other part of it is this is just how stupid college football is. At some point, somebody needs to take college football by the neck and say, here's what we're going to do. We're going to make 8 divisions that are 16 teams each, right? 8 or 12 teams each. I don't care. That's 96 teams, isn't it? If my math is correct. 96 teams, 12 teams. Okay, there's 120 in FBS. We'll make 8 divisions that are 14 teams each, so that now you're talking about 112 teams. Guess what? Those other 8, you put them in FCS and say, go where you belong, because there's about 8 teams at the bottom that probably don't belong in FCS. My alma mater, Temple included. Put 112 teams in 8 divisions. It's not that hard. The 8 champs, and then you have 8 or 4 if you want 12 teams in the playoffs. You have 8 champs and 8 wild cards. And that's the end of it. 16 teams, be done with it. But instead, we've got one division with 14 teams, one with 12, one conference with 8, one conference with 16, and everything. They don't play each other all the time. We got all this nonsense, and then we're going to have these arguments about acting as if it's some sort of crime that Team 13, and Team 12 and Team 13 got in, and Team 13 got left out, and Team 12 didn't. When you get past about the top 4 or 5 teams, now we're just basically throwing darts at a board to try and figure out who deserves it and who doesn't. If you put all the teams, if you put 8 automatics in, which means you win 8, you have 8 power leagues for all the FBS, teams. Like I said, 8 14-team leagues. It's not hard. It really isn't. And if you have 8 14-team leagues, and they all play a 9-game schedule, basically, with 2 divisions. Okay? You've got 6 teams in your division that you play, and then you still got to play 3 on the other division. And then if you're going to win the conference, you got to win a conference championship game against the other division. In other words, there's going to be a lot more uniformity to who's playing who. But until that happens, all of these arguments are silly. They're all silly and stupid, okay? Because the bottom line is Alabama lost 3 times. Cry me a river. You don't deserve to be in the playoffs. And you know what? Same thing with Ole Miss. Same thing with anybody that has 3 losses. If you have 3 losses, that means you've lost 3 times, which means you didn't take care of business. So if you happen to get in with 3 losses, we're happy for you, but it might not happen. And if it doesn't, it's your own fault. Speaking of your own fault, there are people that are crying a river because Pitt is getting sent to Detroit for, a nothing bowl against Toledo. That's what you earn when you lose 5 games in a row. I don't want to hear about how, we finished 1 game ahead of this team, or we actually beat this team. Why do they have a little better bowl than we do? When you lose 5 games in a row and you have a fan base that doesn't traditionally travel to bowls, guess what? You're most likely going to get left out of the good bowls, the better bowls even, the bowls that are what we call mid-tier or whatever, the Pinstripe Bowl in New York City, I wouldn't go because my ass ain't sitting out in the cold to watch a football game in December. But the bottom line is you at least go to New York City. There's a little prestige to that. But you know what? When you lose 5 games in a row, you end up in the bowl in Detroit playing against Toledo and wondering how it happened. We'll do it again tomorrow at 5. Good talking to you. I'm Paul Zeise. It is Post-Gazette Live, as we always do it, every single day at 5 o'clock. I jump on and I give you, my thoughts on the Steelers and a number of other
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.